Thank you, Frida. Good morning.
Good morning.
You know it's already all right. It's already all right. And I'm especially convinced of that this morning because we have Charles Holt here. Charles is really not a stranger to us at Open Heart. He has been with us several times now. Is this, what, number 3, number 4? Number 4. Our 4th time having Charles with us. You know him as a phenomenal and fantastic singer. He's an author. He had his first book, Intuitive Rebel, that he came and he shared with us. And now he has a brand new book called Between Me and Dad that he will tell you more about. And then he has copies available. He still has copies of the CDs and all of that. And we're just very glad to have him with us this morning. It's just a wonderful opportunity. I told Charles that when we put his picture up on the screen Sunday before last Sunday, announced that he was coming, and people started clapping because that's how we feel about Charles Holt. And he's with us today to share with us not only his music, but he has a message that he will share with us that is, I know, going to be dynamic. And so, as he comes, let us give Charles an open heart welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. Good to see you again. We're making this a frequent thing, huh?
That's all right.
It's good to be back. It's good to be back in Memphis and the South. And I as Reverend John was mentioning, I flew in early on Wednesday from Los Angeles and immediately noticed how everything had changed since I was here before. The foliage, the trees, the people, my mother, and me. Everything had changed. And so in today's message, we're going to talk about the possibilities of change as it relates to releasing and letting go, not of just what doesn't serve us, but really asking ourselves, what triggers us now? Are there words that we've held on to? And especially what it comes down to is sometimes it really comes down to releasing other people. So we'll talk more about that, but we're going to have a song right now.
You're timed out.
Oh, did you? Okay. So I'm going to do a hymn. Let's do a hymn. Something my grandmother taught me a long time ago. Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not. No, they fail not. As thou hast been and forever will be. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto to me. Summer and winter, springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their orbits above, join all of nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy and love. Oh, great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, oh, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord. It's interesting when you sing and then you get up and speak. You know, you turn right around and do it because after something like that is coursed through you, it's not as if you can just turn on a dime sometimes. It tarries with you, as they used to say. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to not only sing my truth, but also speak my truth. And I'm very grateful to Reverend John Gilmore for giving me the opportunity to be with you all, to speak to the congregation, to speak to the community, to speak to the family here at Open Heart. I was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee, just about 3 hours up the road, in a small community that was founded in 1868 by a missionary by the name of Larry A. Thompson. And the story goes on that this man stumbled upon a field of thickets and brush and stood right on a piece of ground, and he says, well, this is where I'm going to build my church because this is the providence of God that is letting me here. And my grandmother would tell me these stories. And I'd say, well, Granny, it's 1970s now, and I'm here. So this community, you mean it started in 1868? That's over 100 years of sustainability. She said, oh yes. 3 years after the emancipation of the slaves, your ancestors, people that you've never known, but you are their answered prayer, they stood on the walls and knew that something could be birthed here. And I said, well, how did it stay this long? How did it sustain itself? She said, well, we were cobblers. We were dairy farmers. We did anything that we could for ourselves and the community. And I didn't realize it later that what she had said was a gem of wisdom. We did what we could for ourselves, and then we gave it back to the community. That's how you live the lush life, son. Now, my grandmother didn't have running water in her house. She had an outhouse. But she called it a lush life because she used to sing "Great is Thy Faithfulness" to me. So there was something embedded in that song that she had not only known, she had already lived it. So I come along, and I'm the third child by over a decade. My brother's 15 years older than I am. My sister's 11 years older than I am. My parents were born in 1920s. My father in 1925, my mother in 1929. So I was late. I was 44. My mother was 40 when I came in. So I had a whole new agenda. I came here with a whole different intention. But it takes a while to learn that, doesn't it? My father and I went head to head on nearly everything. A man that grew up in the South, that struggled with being a man. I think it was a sanitation workers strike here in Memphis where they held up the signs, "I am a man." I think he spent a large majority of his life trying to find that out for himself. But you know, growing up as a child, you don't think about those things. He's daddy and he's father, and he's supposed to be there when you need him. And he was present physically, but he was emotionally vacant. I didn't come like other people in my family. I needed to be told I was loved. I needed to be touched. I needed to be told, "Son, you did a good job." But those were things that didn't come easy from my father. Everybody else seemed to have this light around what I was here to do. My mother thought I was going to be a doctor or a lawyer. Just do something, son, that's going to make you proud. My grandmother, she said, "Well, he's going to be a preacher. I know he is." It's the first thing that she said. My aunts, my uncles, they all chimed in. I was a celebrated athlete. I wanted to play professional football. But one thing that I wanted more was to hear my father say, "You did a good job. I'm proud of you." I spent my entire life, conscious and unconscious, with the fact that everything that I achieved, I knew my mother was going to say, "Son, I'm proud of you." I knew my uncles were going to pat me on my head. I knew my brother and my sister would say, "That's my little brother." But I wanted to hear my father say, "That's my son. That's my boy." All of his friends would compliment, give me accolades, and I would look at them and smile. But in my mind, I would just be waiting to hear him say something. "Just say one word, Daddy." But he didn't. It took a long time for me to digest that. I went from sadness, not understanding what was going on. Then I thought, it's me. Something's wrong with me. I lived my life like that. Never good enough. And even those institutions like the church, the Pentecostal church, I love the Pentecostal church, but I was never good enough. I was always a little demon. I'm not speaking to myself, am I? You nod off in church after they churched you for all day. You wake up to a tap. Wake up and go sleep. So you're trying to always find things to validate yourself. How can I affirm myself? And I was really looking for my father to do that. But he didn't. And after a while, I left sadness and disappointment behind. And I grabbed a hold of resentment. And I said, "You are here, but you're not. And that pain that I had, wanted to somehow be able to access being in that environment in my own home without even having some kind of relationship with the man that I loved. I loved my dad. When I say I loved him, my father was a king to me when I was a little boy. 3 and 4 years old, I want to go with him. I want to touch him. I want to eat like him. I want to walk like him and talk like him. And then it all seemed to fade into something that was much more desperate. By the time I left to go to college, I went to college on a football scholarship in Alabama. By the time I left, I had told my mother, "Ooh, I'm so glad to get out of this house. I don't know what to do." She said, "Well, what you trying to get away? Who you trying to get away from?" I said, "Him." She said, "Oh, you did the best you could, son. But you don't want to hear that. You can't hear that when you're 16, 17 years old. All you feel is the pain." Went to college, transferred, eventually graduated from Rhodes College here in Memphis. Wanted to play professional football, struck out at that, did really well, then started working with IBM, which was not my dream, that was my mother's. I started living my mother's dream. Still trying every way I could to get some kind of validation. I knew my mother would say, "Good job." And I remember when I told my father, "Dad, I just got a job with IBM." He said, "Mm-hmm." And I never will forget this. I was driving back from Nashville to Memphis because my job with IBM was here, and I saw a billboard. And it said, "Jesus cares for you." And I slowed my car down and I said, "I don't care if Jesus cares for me. I want my daddy to care for me." When I got ready to move to New York, I told my mother. She was happy. She told me to go see a psychiatrist first. But you know, a mother's love is a mother's love. And that was just a way of trying to protect me. But I wanted to go tell my father. But I got to the place where I was even afraid to go do that. See, as these things mounted, I noticed that there were walls that I had built and things that I had jumped over where I couldn't get back to the courage to even ask him anything. So the relationship just got deeper and wider. Not in a good way, but more distant. And I moved to New York. First job I got was with Jesus Christ Superstar. And I thought, ooh, I'm even farther away from them now. And we were on the sleeper bus. We just finished the show. We were in Castle, Wyoming, headed back to Long Beach, California. And I took a nap and I went back up and started talking to the driver, and I saw this apparition come up. And I looked to my right, out of my peripheral, and just faded down really quickly. Well, you know they have tumbleweeds in that part of the country. And I said, well, there must have been a tumbleweed that was following the bus. The driver said, yes, that's possible. Started talking to the driver again, and this apparition comes once again, and I looked over it, and it didn't move. It stayed. And it was my father's face. And of course, in a rant, I asked, what are you doing here? Why have you come now? What is this, a torment? A few hours later, we stopped to get breakfast at a restaurant. There was a couple with a small child in front. And the child was telling the parent, what it would like for breakfast. The parent had already asked. And instead of hearing the child's voice, I heard my father's voice. I rushed to the restroom, and that's when I just let it all out. I said, are you following me to torment me? Just all kinds of things went through my head. I returned back to Harlem. I was living in Harlem at the time after the tour, and I sat on my bed and I heard a voice say, call him. Call him now. And I never bypassed talking to my mother for a few minutes before speaking to anybody else in the household. I called and I said, Mom, I'm speaking to Dad. She said, is everything okay? I said, yes, ma'am, everything is fine. My father picked up the phone, and I went down a laundry list. Just started a laundry list of things he had said and he had done during my entire life. I was so hurt at that point, pain, but it was mostly out of fear because I had not known how to even talk to him. And my father listened to that rant for about 2 or 3 minutes. And at the end he said, you must be talking about somebody else. I don't never remember any of that stuff you said. Steam was coming out of my ears at this time. I went down another laundry list and I heard the voice say, tell him. And I said, Daddy, I forgive you. I forgive you. Silence. Well, I got angry. How dare I say something to you and you not have a response from me? This is how it's been our entire life. And so I started to go down another list and something said, say it. Tell him. And I said, Dad, I love you. I always have loved you and I always will. And I hung up the phone. Just a release of tears. A release of tears. And in that moment, something germinated inside of me and said, that is your mantra to him. Every time you see him, you tell him how you feel about him. Tell him exactly how you feel about him. And I would go home for maybe days at a time, 2 or 3 days at a time. I was on Broadway at the time. And I'd leave, getting ready to go back to the airport, and I'd look at my mother and I'd say, Mom, I love you. And then I would look at my father and I'd say, Daddy, I love you. No response. I said, you keep at it. This was the commitment that I had with myself. This was the beginning of the journey of self-discovery, understanding what I really came here to give. No matter what anyone else responded in any other way, was it favorable or unfavorable, somewhere in there I was discovering this gives me joy. And I'm going to do it until the next leap happens, until I find out for myself. It's not easy and it is painful, but I have to go through with it because I made a covenant with myself. My father was diagnosed with end-stage renal disease. He was on dialysis 3 days a week. Years and years and years had gone by. And I said, you know what, I'm going back to Nashville. It was at this time that I was going to Spiritual Center so I could have a base in Nashville, take care of my parents, and go out on the road on the weekends. And I remember walking in, and I tell you, this tall, strong man with an imposing type of physique, not big, but just strong, had dwindled down. My father had at least dropped 2 or 3 inches in height, was bent over, now shuffling. But something had changed. I remember getting ready to go back home after spending 6 months. And I looked at my mother and I said, well, Mom, I'm ready to go back to LA. I love you. Daddy, I love you too. Daddy loves you too, baby. there were two sides of my head. One was he's finally said it. That was holding, that side was always holding on to anger and disappointment and pain. And then there was the other side that said, he's ready. Aren't you ready? Didn't you walk in that forgiveness? Years ago, did not you tell him that you loved him with all of your heart? Didn't you say it? I said, yes, I did. And I said, this is a no-brainer. I'm going to go with him because he's ready and I am too. From that day forward, it was just listening, deep listening to my father's war stories, World War II. And it was also the shuffling off of all of those things that I held him to as father and dad. I started to learn who the man was. His pain, his disappointment, and his relationship with his father. And I said, wow, this is interesting. It's generational. It's just passed down from one generation to another. And I'm the one to stop that. I'm the one to stop that cycle. I am. It's not easy to let go. It's not easy to release. But what I found was as I released more of my father, I released more of myself. Because I too was in prison in the mind that I had incarcerated him in. My father passed last year, February 2nd, 2013. Now I remember coming down from Los Angeles and spending the last 5 days with him in the hospital, from coherency to nothing at all. And I sat in that room, and my entire life with him flashed and came and sat with us. And I said, God, what is this? The Spirit said, He will always remind you of your journey, the good, the bad, and sometimes the awful. But that's the gift that He leaves with you. Is that under all of that are those lessons that after you have shuffled off of holding him hostage, you can then access that love that you have for him, because if you love him enough, he'll tell you his secrets. If you love anything enough, it will tell you its secrets. And there's always something under the tongue. Always something spoken in that beyond space, where only the Spirit of the living essence of eternal intelligence lives. And it's ready. It's ready to speak. And it may take a while, because forgiveness is a journey. It's not a destination. It's what we've come down here to do, to release and let go. I release and I let go. If we really sing it, I let the Spirit, what? Run my life. And my heart is open wide, because I'm only here for who? God. That's it. But then we have those who we've called into our existence, in our experience, to help us be more of who and what we came down here to be. And my father said something to me before he passed. He said, Dad is not going to be here much longer. But just know that I will be flying with you. Everything must change. Nature is giving us that right now. That which was beautiful last spring has shuffled off. The leaves have fallen. But somehow that all was in divine order, because now what we see is even more beautiful. It's all good. some of what I'm teaching young men, letting go process and the releasing process of the pain is directly associated with their success. And what I mean by that is that when we live a life of pain and hurt, it affects every area of our life. Because it's all about relationship. If we can't let go of our fathers, then the essence of our father will show up in our boss on the job. The face again. You think you can get away from me? You cannot. Because I'm here to give you a blessing, not to torment you. You're trying to get away from your mother. Well, she'll show up in your mother-in-law. Same thing. Try it. What have I married into? But then we realize that they come to be the blessing if we look at it and not run from it. Because as long as I ran, there was this emotional umbilical cord that I could not get away from. I ran and ran, but it found me. The work that I'm doing now, I tell Reverend John, is allowing young men and young women to experience their greater brilliance by letting go and stepping into who and what they really are. Because we are not our pain. We are not our past. As a matter of fact, the past gets us to a leaping off point so that we can jump further into our brilliance and genius. Because it's right there waiting for us. But we can't jump with weights. We can't jump with burdens at all. We have to be free. And I'm so glad that I had an opportunity to speak with you all this morning, because I will be back in Memphis in the fall. Me doing something with some organizations here in the city as it pertains to the healing and the freedom of our youth. And not just youth. We're all healing. We're all trying to be as free as we possibly can. Setting it up. There was a song we used to sing when I was growing up, and they want to be just like us. Setting their examples by us, and they're never going to miss a single thing we do. For tomorrow.